Good afternoon. The Commission is here, having completed its activities in the Cabinet Room in the Rose Garden, as you know. Chairman Rogers will have a brief comment or two to begin this brief press availability, and then he and Vice Chairman Armstrong only will respond to a few questions. With that, Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by thanking members of the press for the cooperation that they've given to the Commission. We've had a lot of activity and several public hearings, and we've been very pleased at the objectivity and the thoroughness of the press. I also want to comment about the activities of the Commission. I think that it's, in my memory, the most outstanding group in terms of dedication to the job and thoroughness with which they performed their work that I've ever known. We started out with a very congenial relationship, and that's continued on, and it's grown. And we had a dinner last night that was, which was one of the most interesting and friendly discussions that I've ever had, and we spent a lot of time together. But that's all of a personal nature. The fact is that this report, which you've all received by now, is the combined work of the Commission. It's not the work of any one person. It's not the work of a staff. It's the work of each member of the Commission and the staff. This Commission, in the final days before we worked out the recommendations, went over this report page by page so that we were together in a conference room for well over a week going over each page of this report. And I hope that it will stand the test of time. We certainly have done a lot of work on it. I'm particularly glad that we were able to determine exactly what happened. We know precisely how this accident occurred. And I think that, I certainly hope that there will be no nagging questions that remain about it. I think every agency that worked with us on this report and all of the people on the Commission came to the same conclusion, that this tragic accident was a result of the failure of that joint on the right aft booster rocket. The other comments are contained in the report. We were very careful about setting them out. We try to comply with the mandate the President gave us, and we think we've done that. Let me remind you of what our function was. First, we were asked to determine the cause or causes of the accident. And as I say, I think that was done, and done so that no question remains. We were also asked to consider any other aspects of the shuttle program that had safety features so that we could make recommendations that would contribute to safe flight in the future. And we accepted that mandate not only in terms of this accident, what caused this accident, but also in our investigation of the other aspects of the shuttle program. We found other things that we think need a lot of attention, and some need to be corrected. And we've commented on those in the report. You'll notice in the preface that we pointed out what we were not asked to do. We were not asked to make decisions about the program in the future. We were not asked to decide whether there should be another orbiter or not. We weren't asked to make any decisions about financing or how the program should continue from here on. So that we've confined our remarks to the cause of the accident and the safety of future flight. And we've explained that to Congress. I spent the morning briefing both the Senate and the House, and I think they appreciated the fact that we did limit our mandate as asked by the President, and I hope that this report reflects the hard work and dedication that this Commission has given to the task. We're going to have some questions. I'd like to have Neil Armstrong come up and join me. I want to also say that every one of the commissioners did an outstanding job. We have all agreed unanimously on all aspects of this report, and I want to pay particular tribute and give credit to Neil Armstrong because he's done a great job. He did so much of the engineering aspects of it, was so helpful in working out any matters where there seemed to be some difference of opinion about engineering matters, and he's just done a great job. And I hope that the press gives them due credit.
Given that aspect of it, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if Mr. Armstrong would give us an assessment of NASA's target date of July 1987. Do you think the things called for in this report, particularly testing of a redesigned SRB, can safely get NASA to that target, or do you expect a delay?
I'm not aware of the status of the NASA redesign project. I don't know what particular approaches they are taking, although I assume they're taking a wide variety. Assuming that they can select an acceptable modification approach that would have minimum impact, I think that their next summer's estimate may be close to reasonable. Should the redesign that they select require substantially new booster design and joint design and the tests associated with that, then that would be optimistic. But that's an opinion not carefully reasoned.
Let me just ask you.
Could I come back just to the last question for a minute? We emphasize in our report, excuse me, that that safety should be the predominant consideration. And it would be, we think, a mistake to, in our anxiety to get moving again into space, that we move too soon. So we have put great emphasis on safety factor, and I think that's important. Sam?
You've taken so much evidence showing that people knew about the problem of the O-rings at Thiokol and elsewhere. Some of them literally in one document even cried out for help. You took testimony about the pre-launch activities and the teleconferences where Thiokol engineers recommended against launching. When you sift through everything, how did it come about that the people responsible decided to launch anyway?
Well, we've attempted to set that forth in our report. I don't believe there's any easy answer to it.
It's flawed. That I suppose no one will disagree with that.
Well,
How did people come to that point?
It was a failure, and I think you have to sit down and read the report and draw your own conclusions. We were not asked to assess blame, and we have not assessed blame. The facts are all on the table, and I have great confidence in that kind of investigation, which lays all the facts on the table so everybody can see them and then decide what should be done. Obviously, there was a serious failure. And let me just finish, if I may. And we're not going to go beyond that. We're not going to make assessments of blame because we were not asked to, and I don't think we should. Yes?
Secretary.
If the administration and Congress do everything that you recommend in the report, will we then have a safe shuttle program? Conversely, if they do not do everything that you recommend, can the program still be safe?
Well, I think you always have to talk about relative safety when you're talking about a program of this nature. It's a developmental program. It's not operational, and it's going to be developmental for some time. Each flight has different aspects. You learn things on each flight that you didn't know before. So there's always going to be an element of risk, and it would be a mistake to think that you could eliminate the risk entirely from space travel. But if the recommendations are followed, I think it's going to be, the prospects for safe flight are very good.
May I add, Mr. Chairman, that it was not this commission's charter to do a complete evaluation of the shuttle program, nor would it have been possible for us to do so in 120 days. So there are many areas which we did not evaluate, and we are not able to pass judgment on those areas. We did find the cause in the pursuit of that cause, certain other areas came to our attention, which we were persuaded did need additional review and evaluation and perhaps change. And when we ran into those things, we included them in the report.
Let me go back now. Yes.
Was there any material developed by your commission which you feel should be referred to or studied by the Justice Department?
Excuse me?
Was there anything developed by your commission which you feel should be referred to or studied by the Department of Justice?
No, I do not think so.
Grand jury.
In reading the report, one of the things that is very striking is that you frequently say NASA didn't have the resources to do this, the financial resources to do this, that, and the other thing. So they concentrated on what they needed to do most immediately, and didn't worry about the future. Spare parts, planning, training, all kinds of things, scheduling. Was NASA trying to do too much with too little money?
Yes, I think so.
Mr. Secretary, you say that they were trying to do too much with too money, and you were sharply critical of some of their management procedures in your report, and yet missing from the report is any reference to the President or to the Congress. Does that mean that you're absolving them of any responsibility for the weaknesses in the shuttle program?
We aren't either absolving or blaming, as I said, Eric. I think in a sense this was a kind of a national tragedy that a lot of us are to blame for. I mean, I think that in a sense the administration, Congress, the press, if you'll excuse the expression, all of us were too optimistic, too willing to accept the fact that this was operational. And I think we've all learned a lesson. We've learned a lesson that it isn't operational. We have to be very careful. We have to be sure that when we continue this program, which we all hope we will, that it's a safe program. So I don't think that anything is to be gained by trying to assess who's to blame. We know what happened. We know it was a tragic event. And now that the report is out and everybody has a chance to look at it and study, we hope that NASA can continue on with a program which has been very successful in the past and will be in the future.
You and Mr. Feynman differed on one chapter that is winding up an appendix. How did you consider it too harsh, and what will it say?
Well, I don't think we really had any problem. We had discussions among all of the commission members about language. We ended up here with all the language agreed to by everybody. And I know Dr. Feynman and I have discussed this. We've been a little surprised that it got so much attention. The fact is we agree unanimously with this report, and we all respect each other and each other's opinions.
Tell us what the differences are that Mr. Feynman has with
We had a lot of differences on language among ourselves. As I told you, we worked for 9 days going through, and we had differences of opinion among all of us. But we had no substantial difference of opinion, and I'm not going to discuss any differences of that kind because they were so minor. We had a few, well, I'm not going to look at it. I say we had some, as we had among all of us, some differences about wording of the report. And the report represents the combined views of all of us without any exception.
Mr. Secretary, you said that the...
Can we put the questions to Dr. Feynman while he's here?
Well, he's going to be available, and we've decided Neil and I are going to answer questions, and I'm sure that if he has something to say, he'll say it. We're not going to open this up because I have to testify tomorrow and the following day, and even maybe the next day. So I would like to make this reasonably brief. If there are any other questions about the report, I'd be glad to answer.
You said that the previous...
Just a second,
I
excuse
haven't
me.
had time to read the report. Is there anything in there about the word judgment of an individual? When they sent those supervisors out to examine the vehicle, they went back in, according to the Orlando Sentinel down there, and they said everything was all right, but it was too cold, it was too drastically windy. Did they really examine it, or did they just assume it was all right?
So let me say we've attempted in our report to answer questions like that, and I think if you read it, you'll find their answers are there. Yes.
Armstrong, is there some point at which you had the sudden feeling that astronauts really ought to have more control over their fates in programs like this? Can you characterize how you or others on the panel, how this idea, this final recommendation came about, and how far it should go?
Well, I think it's fair to say that both Dr. Ride and myself took no position in that particular recommendation because it would seem to be a conflict. So we neither originated nor objected to that particular recommendation. Having said that, just let me say that I've known a lot of fine people who had crew responsibilities and done fine jobs both in the spacecraft and behind the desk and management and other roles. I think the commission recommendation in that arena is appropriate.
A question for you and for Neil. Did Neil's somewhat optimistic, in my mind, and in some of the technical press's mind, resumption of shuttle flights next year, next July, by July '87, include the work on the SSME and the breaks that had to be done?
Well, I haven't made any estimate about when the flights will continue, because I don't really have a basis for that kind of an estimate.
Let me just add that I don't want that to be misinterpreted. The question was what I thought, and I said I had no knowledge about what design was being selected, what modifications might be chosen. It really would be impossible to make any reasoned judgment. But it's the delay will certainly be dependent, Jules, on what kind of modification is finally selected, and the testing process. You'll find in the report that the Commission feels that an adequate testing program is going to be a very important part of the recertification of the shuttle for space flight, and we recommended an independent body be involved in the certification and this testing characterization and the final evaluation of the design. I really think that at this point in time there isn't anyone on the Commission or perhaps even in industry that can make a good answer as to when the shuttle will fly again. I think it would really be irresponsible to make that judgment.
In terms of technical judgment being closer to late '87 or even early '88.
I don't really think I can make that. I do think if they, and again, let me just say this is my personal opinion and doesn't reflect the Commission's carefully reasoned views, that if they didn't have to change anything, but they could convince themselves that they really could make the old design fly again, it would take probably till next summer to go through the certification, testing procedure, re-verification, and getting ready to go. So it certainly isn't going to be sooner than that.
I know you were careful not to assess blame, but do you think more managers will need to be replaced to help NASA get its house in order?
You're asking me to, in a sense, assess blame. I think that NASA's recent decisions have been constructive. I had a discussion this morning with Jim Fletcher and Admiral Truly. I think they're quite aware of the needs for management changes. I think they're quite aware of the need for restructuring some aspects of management, and I have confidence that they'll do that. I want to also say that there's been, and maybe I'm somewhat responsible for it, some criticism of NASA in failing to give us all the information. I think maybe the word was used too loosely. It was not NASA as a whole. It was Marshall, I think, centered largely, because Admiral Truly headed up the investigative teams that worked with the Commission. And he had a man named J.R. Thompson who worked with him. And they worked exceptionally well. They provided everything that we asked for. They provided it on time. They volunteered things that we had not asked for. So I want to pay the highest compliment to Admiral Truly and his organization for cooperating with the Commission. And I think that we have every reason to hope that and believe that NASA will become much stronger and better as a result of this investigation.
Mr. Chairman, you said you're not...
Did the commission uncover any evidence or information to indicate what actually killed the members of the crew?
No, we did not look into that. We did not think that was appropriate, and we, as you probably know if you followed the investigation, we did not ask questions about that. We thought that that did not really relate to our mandate. We realized there was a lot of public interest in it, but we did not think that was appropriate for us to develop.
There was so much emphasis placed on the problems with the pressures to launch. And the recommendation in there seems to say that you should set a realistic schedule, that not to go beyond the resources. Can you develop that a little bit further? How, not just the next date of the launch, but how are you going to mitigate that launch pressure, which seemed to be so much of the problem?
Well, I think that when you set out with a schedule and you, whatever it was, 24 launches a year, and then you try to live up to the schedule, you have self-imposed pressures. When you realize that you're falling behind the schedule, you can't meet it, then it becomes very difficult, and we have attempted in our report to point that out. So we would urge NASA not to be too optimistic about the launch schedule, to do it on a realistic basis, and I think they will. I think already Admiral Truly has announced the care that he's going to use in working out a launch schedule, and I feel sure that as a result of this investigation and all the attention that it's received, that NASA will be very careful and very conservative about setting up a launch schedule that's too optimistic.
Secretary, what assurances, if any, have you had from the President about whether he will accept your recommendations?
Well, he was certainly very positive in the discussions we had in the cabinet room. I think that he is going to, as he said, going to read the report more fully, and I'm sure that we'll make some announcement on his recommendations in the days ahead.
Chairman, do you see any merit in the idea that the operation of the shuttle system should be handed over to another agency? That NASA itself is not really equipped to be an operational agency. It is better served conducting R&D and special missions, and that some other agency could do a better job of running the shuttle once it's ready to fly again.
No, if you look at the report, you'll see our last concluding thought was to the contrary. We are not suggesting that the NASA's function be transferred to any other agency. We did say that we thought that ELV should be used to a greater extent. We thought that it was unwise to rely totally on the Space Shuttle system. So to that extent, I expect that if the recommendations are followed, and the President has already indicated, in fact, he indicated a year or so ago that he supported that idea, and I think there will be more ELVs used. But I don't think that we had any intention of recommending a transfer of NASA's functions. Quite the contrary.
You said that safety should be the primary consideration in all future launches, and yet up to the point of the shuttle disaster, in reports that were put out, the criteria for the shuttle was actually defined in terms of being operational and quote-unquote cost-effective. Wouldn't it become quite clear then that the cost pressures, the underfunding of NASA over the years, and the very concept that the priorities were cost-effectiveness contributed to the accident that occurred?
Well, I don't know directly, but the answer to your question generally is yes, and we say so in the report. Maybe you haven't read it yet. But you haven't read it?
The implication is that America may not be able to afford to run the space program, considering that NASA has done very well in budget terms over the past several years?
No, I wouldn't say that.
You say
you had a whole separate panel that dealt with NASA's contractor relationships. And yet in the report, the only thing that you really point out is perhaps better communication between NASA and its contractors. Do you have any other advice as to how NASA should conduct its relationships in the future?
Well, not specifically, because we didn't want to get in the, in the business of singling out contractors, but I have a feeling that NASA is going to be very thorough in its review of all the functions performed by contractors. I mean, I think the experience here, we have two contractors, one who, Rockwell, that appeared or thought that it recommended against launch, and NASA confused the recommendation. And we know about the Morton Thiokol, so I expect that NASA will have a thorough review of its relationship with all the contractors. One more question.
In the wake-up, Chairman, is there any consensus on the panel about whether non-astronauts, such as Krista McCullough, should fly on flights as long as they are developmental and not operational?
Yes, we had a considerable discussion about that, and we decided not to include that in the recommendation because we think it's a policy matter. And there are a lot of differences of opinion about it. We do think that what Admiral Truly has announced already, that certainly in future launches that it be confined to astronauts, but we didn't think it was appropriate to be arbitrary and say never under any circumstances could someone outside of NASA fly in the shuttle, because that's a policy matter that will have to be decided by NASA. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it.
Come with us. No exclusives.
And in fact, this may be the solution that is done at the Chernobyl facility.
Well, somebody said that if you dump water on this kind of a nuclear fire, you simply make radiated steam, which is very dangerous.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we know enough about the particular temperatures involved or exactly how big the fire is or anything of that nature that we should really speculate on the best way to put it out.
But this is a fire in the same sense as burning wood, combines with oxygen and gives off carbon monoxide. Is it the same idea of a fire? And I'm putting the question poorly. I'm trying to get a layman's understanding of it.
Well, we simply don't have the details of how fast it is burning. It may be like a slow hot coal. It's a very slow process rather than a large rapid fire. And we simply don't have the details yet.
Mr. McCain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vaughn, it's my understanding that the first indications of this disaster were because of alarms raised by the Scandinavians. Is that true?
That's my understanding from the press reports, and I don't have any information to the contrary.
Also, we have information that the Soviets, obviously there was some delay between the time that this accident began and the time that the Soviets mentioned it almost